Paul's challenge here is the same one that I want to give you today. Mourn with those who mourn. Rejoice with those who rejoice. There's something about having a village that's there with you to rejoice when you're rejoicing and to mourn when you mourn. It doesn't remove the loss. It just gives you somebody to experience it with. When Herod realized that he had been outwitted by the Magi, he was furious and gave orders to kill all of the boys in Bethlehem and its vicinity who were 2 years old and younger, in accordance with the time that he learned from the Magi. So this is when Herod loses any semblance of sanity. He goes from disturbed to flat out monster, killing babies. Now, people debate, again, what is going on here. But in that day, the population of Bethlehem was somewhere between 1,000 and 1,500 people. Small town, pretty insignificant town until Jesus was born. And so the math gives us somewhere between 15 to 24 baby boys that were murdered because Herod was insecure and after Jesus. Now, there's a complication with this because Josephus, the guy I told you about, in his history of Herod, he doesn't even mention this, right? It doesn't even get a footnote in the book, which is wild because there's so much craziness that Herod did, and this doesn't even get a footnote. The only time we see it is in Matthew here. But we know that there's other parts of the Bible that are not squared by not having historical, explanation or references. And a lot of people think that it doesn't show up with Josephus for two reasons. The first reason is simple. It's because it was in Bethlehem, and it was such a small place that a lot of inconsequential things were happening there. Herod had a lot of other things to deal with, and it was just a little tiny outpost. So things that were happening there weren't as important as things that were happening in the big city of Jerusalem. And the second piece of that is that it wasn't one of the worst things that Herod ever did. It's just mind-boggling to me. That is wild, how killing up to 24 kids-ish, just because he was insecure and just because he was scared of a little baby boy that was called the King of the Jews by 3 or 4 guys from another country, and he just kills them. Now, I can't imagine the chaos. I mean, we don't have it in the Bible. All we have is when Herod realized that he had been outwitted and outsmarted, he was furious and gave the guys an order to go kill all the boys in Bethlehem. We don't know how long it took. We don't know a lot of specific details, but I don't know about you, but I've had a 15 to 24-month-old baby boy in my arms. I have 2 of them. And I can imagine the chaos that if somebody ripped into my house and ripped my baby boy out of my arms to kill him, you can imagine the scene. And this is happening at multiple houses, all because of the insecurity and the unhinged nature of a crazy, crazy king. Imagine the chaos. Imagine the mourning. Imagine the loss. Imagine that first Christmas that you didn't even know was the first Christmas without your baby boy because of a king that wanted to eliminate all threats. Imagine the grief. And the reality of this doesn't sink in at first glance for us because honestly, it's not our story. It's not 2024 United States, Western Hemisphere thinking mindset. This is not our story. And you're probably thinking, man, Jason, this doesn't matter to me because it's not my story. I think it's part of your story. Here's why. in all of the chaos, in all of the struggle, in all of the death and mourning and funerals and generations that were stopped and family lines that were crushed, in the middle of all of that, Jesus survived it. Jesus survived it because his dad was obedient. Jesus survived it. This little silver lining of hope paves the way for what Christmas is really all about. Joseph made sure that Jesus survived the slaughter and was able to fulfill his purpose as the King of Kings, not just the King of the Jews. Jesus is still Emmanuel, God with us. You know, and the Christmas narratives are not without loss. The Christmas, like what we've done in our culture today is we've kind of sanitized the Christmas story. We've kind of sanitized the Christmas story so we can sit around in our homes on Christmas Eve and eat cookies and drink hot chocolate and read Luke chapter 2. But remember, Jesus stepped into a world, he was born into a world of chaos, of loss, of people that are experiencing their first Christmas without. These people are not without mourning or pain. They know all about that. And we don't have the words in the narrative, but we know they experienced it. And honestly, that mirrors our life. The struggle that those moms and dads were facing, that mirrors our lives, honestly. Because we have happiness and we have heartache. We have joy and we have pain. We have success. We have failure. We have stretches in our lives that make absolutely no sense. And then we have great stretches in our lives that make absolutely no sense. The only thing that makes it make sense is Emmanuel, God with us. And we sit in the middle of that tension right now. And if we're honest with ourselves, half of us are probably dealing with something or someone that is missing, and we feel stuck in the morning. We feel stuck. That's how life is. It's a mixture of chaos and calm and everything in between. And maybe you don't have a Herod in your life, but I know that you have battles that you're facing. You know, the global church, the Big C church, has celebrated this passage of Scripture for centuries. They've honored the lives of these innocent kids who died at the hands of a corrupt king that was trying to kill the King of Kings. This celebration is called the Feast of the Holy Innocents. And it's celebrated by many Christian denominations on a yearly basis. And it is celebrating these 15 to 24 babies that died here in Matthew chapter 2. But why? Why do we remember that loss? Why would we desire to remember and honor the lives of the kids that were killed in this tragedy? Why do we do that? I think it's simple, honestly. When we mourn together, when we mourn together, or when we remember together, we are all changed together. I think the early church got this right. Sounds crazy to say, but I think the early church got this right because here's how I know that is because Jesus had something to say about it too. In Matthew chapter 5, just a few pages over from where we're at this morning, he says these words: Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. You know, this phrase doesn't seem to make much sense, like happy or the unhappy, happy or the brokenhearted, happy or the broken. I don't know about you guys, but in my weak moments, in my breaking point moments, in my without moments, I don't feel happy. But again, Jesus is not about our happiness. Jesus is about helping us make joy a habit so that love can be a reflex. Let's look at this one in the Message to help it make a little bit more sense. You're blessed when you feel you've lost what is most dear to you. Only then can you be embraced by the one most dear to you. The church planner Paul also taught this in his churches, and in Romans 12:15, we get a cool picture of this. Paul says it this way: rejoice with those who rejoice. Mourn with those who mourn. You know, in ancient cultures, mourning was a season, so to speak. In those cultures, it was much more than just you get a call from family at the hospital, and then you rush to be there, and then there's like the viewing, and then, you know, there's the funeral, and then there's the cemetery, and then there's eating fried chicken afterwards. It was much more than that. It was a season. They lived these passages out. This warning that Paul is giving, this encouragement that Paul is giving, it's double-sided. He's like, man, mourn with those who mourn, but man, rejoice with those who rejoice. Let's kick it up a notch, right? And if you didn't have the people to help you in that season, if you had a small family, or you didn't have enough people around you in your village, you could like pay people to come and mourn with you. It's in the Bible. There's plenty of other extra biblical stuff that talks about that. You could pay people to come and sit with you to mourn your loss. Paul's challenge here is the same one that I want to give you today. Mourn with those who mourn. Rejoice with those who rejoice. There's something about having a village that's there with you to rejoice when you're rejoicing and to mourn when you mourn. It doesn't remove the loss. It doesn't. It just gives you somebody to experience it with. And I think that's better than the removal of the loss.